Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 56 of IWFM's Navigating Turbulent Times series. We had a bit of a break. We're back into our autumn season. I appreciate we had episode 55 last week. So welcome to this episode that's tackling the huge topic, as we're aware and fully aware, of sustainability and what needs to change. So from today's episode, we are having a presentation around the overview of our 2021 sustainability survey results, supported by our partner Anenco, and I respect we've got a member on the panel from Anenco. We're also going to look at the highlights from the intent to action, which is a theme that's coming out of a survey. So we're going to have a look at that and the barriers to progressing the agenda. So we do have a strong panel today, which we will see on the next screen as we go along. So for you that join us for the first time and some of our repeat listener viewers, I'm Peter Brogan, Head of Research and Insight at the IWFM. I'm going to be the host for today's episode. So I would encourage you from the outset to send your questions in. We're trying to make this as interactive and engaging for you as an audience. So please bring your questions through as you think of them and use the question function on the software. This webinar is being recorded and is live, as I'm probably demonstrating. But as you can see there, we're going to go through the survey results through the colleague you see there, Greg Davis, chair of our own sustainability special interest group at IWFM. So hello, Greg. If you'd just like to introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, yes. Good morning, everybody. As Peter said, my name is Greg Davis. I'm current chair of the Sustainability Special Interest Group. It'll be my pleasure this morning to run through some of the highlights of the 21 Sustainability Survey, really with a view to provoking some discussion and hopefully some good questions that you can test us all with. I'm also conscious in talking to you that compared to the picture the IWFM have, I need to update it because it looks like not only have I grown a beard, but I've aged about 30 years over the pandemic, which hopefully isn't true. But anyway, thank you, Peter.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is about sustainability and what needs to change, and not yourself, Greg, but I probably can echo that for myself as well, but thank you for that. As mentioned, Anenco have been our partner on the sustainability survey for 2 years. So hello, Duncan. How are you today?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be here. Proud Anenco to be a partner and supporter of the IWFM in what is, some serious topics that we need to discuss. I'm looking forward to the results today and the questions later on.
No, thank you, Duncan. And as we move along, as you see on our screens, a lady I know very well and work very closely with at the Institute for a number of years now. So hello, Sophie.
Hello, Peter. Thank you very much and good afternoon. So I'm Sophie Hooper. I'm the head of policy at IWFM, and I'm responsible for delivering the sustainability strategy for our organization from a policy perspective. And I'll be using the output from the sustainability survey as a blueprint really for our activity over the next few years.
Thank you, Sophie. Last but not least, a gentleman I met on a project we supported around some guidance with another professional body. Hello, Paul.
Good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to join the panel today. I'm the Environment Design Standards Manager at the Cooperative Group. I write the specifications and design models for a whole range of environmental issues relating to water, air and land, and obviously some of the significant environmental impacts that address sustainability. So interested in the survey and a chance to chat through some of the outputs.
No, thank you, Paul, and others. So the audience now, you've been introduced to the panel. So Duncan, Sophie and Paul will be joining us later for that discussion. And at this point, I will then encourage you again to keep sending your questions through. But at this point, as promised, we've launched our sustainability survey 2021, our 14th edition of that survey, a long-running survey today. So I have the great pleasure of handing back to Greg at this point to give you a real overview, and as I referred earlier, about this intention and action, what we actually mean from that. So what the results are showing us, what's the impact around this for FMs, and also what are the challenges, and yes, dare I say it, the opportunities as well around sustainability as we move forward. So I want to get straight into the content. The panel will be back later. Send your questions through. So at this point, Greg, I'd like to hand over to your dear self to run the audience through the sustainability survey for 2021.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you also to all those who may be listening who contributed to this year's sustainability survey. It is the 14th year we've run it, and I believe it is the largest body of evidence we have focused on FM in terms of what the trends have been established and developed over sustainability over the last 2 decades. I've started by way of introduction with reflecting a little bit back on my introductory slide from last year, which was this VUCA world it was entitled. And as well as dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, we were highlighting that there were still other things happening and profound changes to our environment, be it flooding or major fires. That also unfortunately hasn't changed, because 2021 has seen catastrophic flooding. No doubt most of you have seen the pictures in areas such as Germany, Belgium, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, India, Nigeria, Sudan and China, as well as those fires around the Mediterranean in Greece, Italy and Turkey, the Russia, the US and Canada. So they have endured, as indeed as the coronavirus pandemic. And if the BMJ article of 2017 also endures, pollution has led to another 9 million deaths a year worldwide. So we are needing to look at the subject in its broadest capacity as a reflection to start. As far as said, it's the 14th survey that the IWFM has produced. In terms of demographics, respondents were 64% end users, with a mixture of facilities management companies, FM service providers and consultants factoring into that. Respondents broken down by organizational size has always tended to be relatively stable as far as the survey goes, and that again has endured this year. So approximately 25% of respondents were in organizations of 0 to 250 people. There was another 25% up to 1,000 in terms of people within the organization, another 25% between 1,000 and 5,000, and then strangely enough another 25% in 5,000 plus. So again, it was a very good representation. Report followed a similar format to previously, although we did nuance it, we did change it slightly, whereas historically, having had the survey findings, we've had a workshop to discuss them. This year, the workshop we had before producing the survey to help actually nuance and reflect some of the questions and maybe get into some of the bit more detail. So it helped inform what we were asking. What you will find within the report, as well as the key findings and executive summary, were 3 areas we looked at and I'd like to look at for the purposes this morning, which are return to work, net zero and staff and capabilities were 3 of the larger themes that came out. Looking at sustainability as far as organizational importance goes, that has actually increased. So 95% of respondents were saying that sustainability remained important or very important to the organization. In terms of how they were viewing that, though, we have seen some change. Historically, and if I use the 2017 survey as an example, resource cost management at 66% was seen as most important, followed by customer expectation at 62%, legislative compliance at 57%, and then maintaining or enhancing the brand at 52%. So very much that legal, moral, financial, and reputational spread. This year, and at 84%, responsible business was overwhelmingly the major area of importance. And while our legal, our moral, and our reputational drivers then came in after that, interestingly, the cost drivers, so good resource management and cost effectiveness, we'd seen it had been dropped below climate emergency and business resilience. So perhaps we're seeing some patterns of change as to where sustainability and why sustainability has been driven within organizations. If we look at this in terms of the areas, so the topics that are being covered, similar picture as number one. Health and safety has always tended to be the most important area, but compared to previous years when areas such as waste and carbon management would be second and third, again relatively predictable looking from a sustainability and environmental sustainability perspective. This year we've seen health and well-being and equality and diversity come in at second and third, dropping carbon and waste management down, and then just below waste and recycling, we've got flexible work. That, just to give you an idea, for the 2017 survey was at 15% in terms of importance, and was just above, or would be just above Biophila in this year's survey. So that has increased dramatically, and undoubtedly as part of this return to work, we are seeing the changes. One of the other things to note with regards to at least some of these is looking at the 2016 survey, and that was our 10th survey, and we asked the question there, what do you see as being the issues over the next 10 years? And two of them that came out of that were well-being, so implementing well-being measures, and also looking at social value in a lot more detail, and how can we set measures for social value. And pleasingly, these are two areas that, having been identified here, we have looked to provide solutions for, either with the excellent work that Sophie and other colleagues on the Sustainability Special Interest Group, in collaboration with other organisations, has looked to put together the National Tom FM plugin. And again, if you don't know about this, please do look for some more information with regard to measuring social value. So it actually does help with in terms of one measurement and one reporting standard. And then also what has happened as far as well-being has gone, particularly over the last year, that the pandemic has been a driver towards looking at organisations actively investing in well-being. And as you will see from the orange of the two graphs there, which are the 2021 figures, continued investment in almost every area, and significantly so with nutrition, which was remained on parity, but both of those seeing really good progress there. If we look at the readings again, or we look at the results from a slightly different perspective, one of the questions that we asked this year were, what are the top 5 priority areas for sustainability over the next 12 months? Carbon and energy management dominated. We found this from the workshop as well with regards to net zero, was the main topic, with, again, understandably flexible working, health and well-being, health and safety, and equality and diversity, reflecting a number of recent changes and influences. All of them, though, are already on that list and quite high, and for sure they still need to be developed. But one of the questions perhaps we need to consider and look at is that as we recover and come out of the pandemic, what about the remainder of the other list? You know, what potentially could be the flexible working or the social value or the well-being for the next 2 to 3 years, and how well equipped are we as an industry to be able to respond to that and proactively manage it? If we turn our thoughts to carbon and net zero, question within the survey was, what do you believe has driven this rise in carbon targets in organisations? And we separated this out by looking at responses from end users and service providers, so hopefully gathering both ends of the scale. These were the major drivers we've seen, and while there is correlation with some, so for example, government targets and pressure, be it from stakeholders or customers, was quite consistent and seen equally across both end users and service providers. We did start to see some change. So moral obligation, social responsibility, and climate change, net zero, were seen as being more of a driver to end users than from a service provision perspective, and perhaps that again is reflecting this corporate responsibility that we've seen as being a primary driver for sustainability, filtering through into some of the key areas of it. But equally, legislative compliance, business resilience, and interestingly, investor funding were seen as being more of a driver from the service provider perspective rather than end users. So my question here, and maybe something we'd want to explore later, is what are the end users seeing that maybe the service providers aren't? And potentially, what are the service providers seeing that the end users aren't? And how can we match those together? Because by being more cohesive and identifying on a more collaborative basis what we need to do, surely we will work to better effect. Maybe some of the reasons for that comes back to carbon management as well. And this is something that we've identified and talked about from a special interest perspective for a number of years. And this is how we're measuring carbon, how we're measuring energy within our premises and wider if we start to capture not just scope 1 and 2, but scope 3 emissions. And with regards to the results you can see here, there is a myriad. There always has been, and it looks like for at least in the short term, there will continue to be a number of different means and metrics people are using to actually measure their carbon. Is this still going to be the way going forward? I don't know. I'd hope not, because certainly something that's a bit more consistent allows for greater granularity in what's being produced and identifying where people actually stand. That's one side of the topic. The other one is with regards to data availability, and I'll just highlight some of the feedback we had here with, do we have the tools? Are we equipped to be able to accurately measure and manage carbon? For 35% of respondents, the answer is yes. So they had good access to all baseline and ongoing data they needed to help them reach whatever targets they were setting in whatever format. 25% didn't have access to the data they needed at all. Further 12% had some baseline figures only. And then finally, another 12% had some ongoing metrics, but had no baseline figures to marry them against. So it does provoke the question here, if it's not being properly or accurately measured, how can we effectively manage it? And what does that mean for our overall targets? So another area there that maybe we need to consider and explore a little bit further in the questions. My final element is to looking at skills and capabilities. And interestingly, in response to the question is, what do you think will drive sustainability in FM? 84% of people came back with it's better skills and better knowledge. And just to give some counterpoint to that, client demands or pressure was second at 65%. Further legislation at 65% was third on the list. And then innovation, employee demands, and mandatory rating schemes all drop below 40%. So as I said, overwhelmingly, we need to be better informed and better skilled. Against that, one of the questions you asked was, how well do you feel skilled in a number of areas? And these are just some of them I've highlighted. And on the face of it, particularly in areas such as we will see health and safety, waste and recycle, flexible working, how that has grown. The industry is very well equipped, with the majority of people believing they have the skills and knowledge they need to be able to deliver meaningful and tangible results on behalf of their organization. But my question is, what about some of these others? The areas I've highlighted there in capital letters, in bold, apologies. They were the areas that people identified as we're going to be working on these over the next 12 months, and yet two of them, so in equality and diversity and carbon, climate change and net zero, less than half the respondents felt they had the skills and knowledge to deliver that. So that is an identifiable gap in terms of us as an industry getting from where we need to be to actually really adding meaningful information back into the industry. So to finish up with, and in conclusion, sustainability is not going to go away. The IPCC report, which was a code red for humanity as described by the UN Secretary General, as well as being alarming in some of its findings, actually did identify some opportunities or optimism there, that if we do something about it, and we are cohesive and we are collaborative in terms of delivering solutions, there is hope here for us to make a meaningful difference. That's on one side, and the other side we've seen the beginning of the week, Extinction Rebellion again causing disruption on numbers of roads and motorways throughout the country. I don't think that'll change either. And if the University of Bath report on the perception of 16 to 25-year-olds on climate change is to be true, potentially it could be forecast that they may increase. So in finishing my presentation, in looking at some of the highlights of the report, it's not the report in detail. I would say please do download a copy, or however you consume your information, and read it in more detail. There is a lot more information in there, but very much so, sustainability is a huge opportunity for our industry. Workplace and facilities managers, we are the linchpin to drive this. Sustainability touches more of what we do in organizations than any other part of the business. We bring together the need of owners, end users, and the supply chain, and without them, it cannot be fully achieved or actually realized in the long term. And at that point, I will stop and say thank you very much for the opportunity to highlight some of the main findings. And I'll hand back to Peter for some hopefully informed discussion.
Thank you, Greg. Excellent job of basically a quick overview of the Sustainability Survey 2021, which is now available on our website. So appreciate I've had some questions in talking about the slides. Yes, they will be made available. The report today that Greg's gone through, the tables, charts are from that report. So please look at that when you get a chance to dig a bit deeper. So I encourage all the panel to come back on, and they now have. Just waiting on Duncan. There you are. So we're all back. So you got introduced to these lovely people earlier on. We're just going to go into a panel discussion, and I can already see questions are flying through. So people are listening and actioning, which is good. So we're getting questions come through. So I want this to make it interactive as the audience. If you've got a question for a panelist, please fire it through. We will get through them. So we're going to go into a panel discussion with integration of questions from the audience as well. So please send them through. I'll monitor them as we speak. But I'm going to kick off to the panel, and I want to bring Paul and Duncan in here. Obviously, listening to the sustainability survey results there and the report, and obviously with your experience within the agenda of sustainability for a number of years now. How do we empower FMs to shine as this linchpin in supporting sustainability within the organisations? And I've purposely gone to you two respectively first to see it from a co-op and an ENCO's perspective of, is that actually happening, and have you seen it from a client perspective? So Duncan, I've seen you very quick off the mark with your unmute mic, so I'm going to go to you first.
I shouldn't be so quick with a finger. Anyway, I feel that that the FMs that we're talking to are now becoming the kind of the guardians of the data. They're the ones that are starting to take the roles of gathering all the information, gather all the data that they require, and I think they're ones that are now starting to be the guys, the people who can really prove to the board if aspirations are being delivered, and evidence of progress to stakeholders, customers, suppliers, etc., that action is being taken and results are being made. So from our perspective, I think that's where they sit.
Oh, that's great. And Paul, anything from your own perspective as well as your current role at the co-op?
I think data is the critical aspect here, isn't it? And in particular, there are some well-established methodologies, the Science-Based Targets Initiative and the Greenhouse Gas methodology, which allows you to split up your emissions into the scopes 1, 2, or 3. And it's scope 3, which is a particular challenge, I think, particularly within the FM world. It's about being able to establish what's the most significant of those scope 3 emissions in particular. So being able to measure in the first place, create some targets, and then monitor towards that impact. And one of the things we've got in place at the cooperative group is to try and get to net zero by 2040. And that does include some scope 3 emissions, and particularly focusing on those which we've considered to be most significant. And within our products, particularly within the food retail business. So we're looking at by 2025, 11% operational reduction in overall carbon emissions. That's being able to do that complex analysis really in terms of all the embedded carbon associated with the agricultural activities, the transport, marketing, packaging, and obviously the waste elements at the end of it. So I think that's one of the key areas, and I think it was really interesting reflecting onto that as to some of the areas where it was felt that skills were perhaps not as strong as some of the other more traditional areas. So in terms of supply chain procurement and net zero, evidence in that trying to hit key targets around scope 3 is probably one of the biggest challenges that the FM community is going to face into.
Yeah, that the 1, 2, 3, particularly 3, has come up as a massive challenge. I don't know, Greg, Sophie, respectively, is there anything to add on that? We use this term linchpin. Is that a fair accuracy of what we want FMs to be or are?
I'd like to comment on that. I think it absolutely is. It's not just aspirational. I think it's just a fair assessment, because they are in that position where they really can put the needs of the landlord together with those of the users and the supply chain. So they really are the key to make all of that work properly. I think there are great examples of people that are already doing this. I think what is our job as the professional body for these people is that we make sure that everyone gets to reach their potential within that role.
And anything to add there, Greg?
Yeah, would absolutely agree with that. I mean, if you take the UN Sustainable Development Goals or global goals, as we're looking at, 13 of the 17 have directly touch on FM. Or workplace and facilities management. And speaking as chair of the Sustainability Special Interest Group, one of the exercises we've been going through over part of this year is actually redefining where does sustainability sit within all the areas of FM, or where does FM sit within all the areas of sustainability, and it is a large piece of work, but it's one of those bits of work where, again, as to all those who are out there, please do have a look at the Sustainability Hub, and if you see any other areas we need to be including on that, or we need to add to that, then please do let us know. It's hopefully providing you with some of the information that you can then go on and actually utilize. The subject is vast. It's not sustainability historically was environmental sustainability, and it was either about waste or energy. It's now, as we've seen, it's a whole gamut. It's a rainbow of colors, and by luck and by opportunity, FM is central to it, and is central to it being managed successfully going forward, in my opinion.
That's great, and from that perspective, we are encouraging views today. So please send your questions through, and they are coming through. We've got a very strong audience on today's webinar, so I am looking at that. So I'm trying to multitask, folks. So if you see my eyes going up and down, it's because I'm looking at the questions coming in. Now, UK can be very hard on itself on many subjects, including sustainability. So I'm going to go with this question around. Greg, you kindly touched upon some of the highlights and challenges that the survey proves for our profession and the agenda of sustainability. Things such as a lack of data, multiple methodologies, questionable carbon calculations, possibly a shortage of the right skills, short-termism in terms of board level and various views on the agenda, which is interesting when you look at the net zero, in particular on one of your latter slides. So I'm going with this question. We've gone with a theme around intent and action on this year's survey, but can I be as bold to say, does this perhaps highlight a lack of serious intent across organisations in the UK, if they are the challenges that we've still got? So I don't know who wants to come in first. Greg, from the body language, I think you're about to kick us off.
Yeah, I was going to say, historically, you could almost certainly level that at a number of organisations in terms of they were looking at their environmental credentials, not from an environmental management or stewardship perspective, but from either a base level compliance, or actually this enables me to do something else. Where this year and where I'm a lot more optimistic is that element, as why is sustainability important to my organization? It's because it's the right thing to do. You know, it's a good bellwether of culture. It's the way we do things around here, and if that's the prevailing message, then that's good for us as an industry as well as good for us as a planet.
That's great. Does anyone want to come out in on that in terms of are those still the challenges respectively across your organisations, Paul or Duncan?
I think what Greg's pointed out there is pretty critical, really, isn't it? There's a lot of hearts and minds which have been flipped over to the crisis, which we've been presented in terms of the data that's come through and the feedback loops. It's easy, though, to set a policy and a target. The challenge is to get the roadmap and to monitor and measure to demonstrate that impact reduction. I think a lot of organisations are in the early days of making bold targets, but how we're actually going to get there is going to become more and more pressing issue over the next 4 or 5 years.
I will bring others in, but as promised, I'm going to weave the audience questions into the panel as well. As you were speaking there, Greg and Paul, respectively, we've got a question in from a viewer listener about the need for, you talked about, particularly in your presentation, Greg, about the need for consistency for measuring carbon and energy. How can we make this happen? Sorry, Greg, you're on mute.
Let me come up. Somebody has to do it, isn't it? Now a legal requirement of all meetings.
It has to happen, yeah. Not to worry.
Just making sure that we did comply. It's a difficult one, and it's something we have talked about. It's not been helped by a changing government agenda over the last 20 years in terms of what we should be measuring, and I'm picking on certain people and not others. The scope 3 makes it slightly more unique in terms of that's very much owned, and as Paul has highlighted, it is a huge piece of work. I think for some organisations and industries, it's actually 70% of their emissions would be captured under scope 3. So it is a huge task. And I think the answer to the question is hard work and collaboration. It's actually coming together, and if there's nothing else out there, why can't we as an industry actually say, well, we will work to these?
Yeah, I've got a couple more questions around this, and I'm going to move into the skills, but we've had a particular question, Sophie, I'd like to bring you in here around, and it was referenced in your slides and presentation, Greg, respectively, is a little bit about social value and more information on the TOM to measuring social value. So to point, we've got a lot of questions in about the measuring and how to. So Sophie, I guess for that listener view, how can they find more out about the TOM and the social value portal?
Well, the direct answer to that is there is a bunch of information on our sustainability hub that makes reference to the TOMS framework and the FM plugin, and people can always get in touch with me. My email address is on the website. But measurement is, of course, the challenge, and how to do that consistently across the board so that you can compare organizations with each other and how they are doing in terms of performance. And the reason why we did the TOMS framework is exactly because the sustainability survey pointed out that a lack of a single framework was a big barrier to driving sustainability. And social value, obviously. And I think social value is a little bit of a misnomer because it's called that because of the Social Value Act, but really what it is doing is looking at trying to achieve sustainability outcomes across the social, environmental, and the economic perspective. So it is a great tool to kind of drive sustainability outcomes throughout your procurement approaches. And then it's up to organizations how they want to embed that throughout the contract management. But happy to help with more specific questions on that particular issues, and there is information.
Thank you. And I think that's some of the how-tos people are craving for as the questions come along. Duncan, love to bring you back in here. One of those challenges, and I'm going to pick this one out because again, this episode's only an hour, and I appreciate audience. We're not going to tackle every challenge here. The skills debate, that long-lasting thing in organizations, they talk about skills, productivity, but from your experiences on the skills debate, How have you addressed that within an ENCO, or some of your experiences across the sustainability agenda, Duncan?
No, I was going to cut in on the last point. Is, you know,
go ahead. Yeah,
we're talking about getting the data, getting the information, etc. I think, you know, one of the problems is, you know, as a consultancy that's just in this area, we've had to work very hard to build a team of people to help us, you know, deliver to the clients that we have. And I think we still have the same pressures on recruitment, I think, as other organizations do. And, you know, we have to work kind of exceptionally hard to upskill all our people. And I think there is a real skills shortage within with kind of sector, call it, or knowledge base. And all too often, you know, we quite often get phone calls from people that turn around and say, I've been given the role of sustainability. Oh, right. And, you know, your experience is, or what, you know, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And I think we going back to, you know, before we get kind of the information and the knowledge and the data that we need to make sure that we're giving the right people the right tools and the right training to be able to do their job and to be able to gather the information and understand what the targets and goals are. And, you know, a bit of an unashamed sales plug, you know, don't be afraid to come and ask for some interim resource or help, you know, from people like ourselves, and get, you know, information and resource from what Sophie just mentioned from the IWFM. So, you know, we can help, but I think organizations need to help themselves and make sure that they're supporting the right people with the right training, resource, and scope to be able to do their roles.
Oh, thanks, Duncan. A nice way of weaving that potential support in there as well. So great work on that. Paul, I guess just to bring you in from a personal and obviously where respectively you work at the moment, what's your views on this skills debate and this particular challenge?
Yeah, I think that in the first instance, the initial response of most people is emotional, but how you actually make that difference is completely a scientific challenge. So the key part for a lot of the delivery of change is to be able to see the interaction and the cross-related themes. So I always think about three main challenges which we're facing in terms of not just climate change, but also the circular economy and net biodiversity gain, and how those three things can actually cross-affect each other. So the circular economy is obviously an opportunity to reuse, retain assets, which will reduce your scope 3 emissions. By addressing biodiversity issues either within the supply chain or directly within your own operations, you've got a great chance to measure and sequester carbon that way as well. So by thinking across the whole range and the gamut, as Greg said earlier, of the various environmental aspects which organizations can touch upon, it's important to be able to see those links whereby one action can have a positive or negative reaction onto another area. So I definitely think that a good, strong scientific background will be able to assist people to move forward on ensuring that the various elements are tied across. And that's probably one of the key parts of gaining social value, I suppose, in order to upskill elements within your own business to ensure that people are working in targeted ways, but also within the supply chain as well, so that whether it's within your procurement or within your maintenance supply chain, to be able to set those targets and upskill and share the best value. So at the co-op, we obviously try to design standards and buildings which are industry leading, but on the back of that, we share those requirements across the industry, and hopefully thereby using the large scale of a big organization, we're able to create some wider understanding of how the overall targets can be met.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. And I appreciate to the audience, we're tackling some of the challenges here, highlighting, but today's really, we're going to dig a little bit deeper and future episodes, obviously, some of this, because obviously with the time allowance of an hour, we're not going to go into every challenge today, but certainly the skills one is one that was prevalent across the survey. But I'm going to move on to the other theme that came out of the survey, and Greg touched upon in his presentation about the future of work. And I will go back to some of the audience questions because they do relate to this, is how do we ensure we collaborate experts and partners to facilitate and empower facilities professionals to be the agents of change in light of organizations moving to a hybrid working model? So I guess, does this make the challenge bigger, or does this make the challenge not necessarily less, but more of an opportunity? So I guess it's going on to that, this thing that every organisation is struggling with at the moment is hybrid working. So I don't know who wants to come in on that in terms of, is that going to shift the whole sustainability agenda, or make it more prevalent across organisations? So it'd be good to have some views from our panel.
I'm happy to start that one, Peter. Again, with it comes back to collaboration, and while our industry is a linchpin and central, we're not the only ones. Who'd have thought 18 months ago that that the delivery of changing working patterns would be a collaboration between IT, HR, and FM. Who knew? But it was, and it's been successful, and it can be in articulating some of what Paul said earlier as well. It's often it's having the vision, then identifying how you get there by bringing the rest of the business to it. And I'm very much a believer that FM has that raised eye level to this, because it looks across so many different parts of the organization. It has the ability to see whether on an individual topic basis or on a broader basis how that can impact. And with regards to hybrid working, again, who knows? I don't think we're in a similar situation to we were 6 months ago or a year ago, with some people. I think about 20% of the population never want to go back into the office as well. 20% of the population can't wait to get back into the office, and we've got 60% in the middle who are actually just waiting to see, well, maybe I'll go back sometimes, or maybe I won't. There was talk, funny enough, it came up at the IWFM conference on Monday as well, about what do you do with space? Do you sit on your hands with regards to some of that space in the interim? Because again, you might, are you going to get rid of too much space and then find you actually need some more? What would that do? These are all questions that I don't think we can answer now, but I think we need to be prepared for, and we need to be preparing for whatever that may come. But looking at what our organisation wants to do and trying best to meet their needs, if that's an answer of sorts.
It's certainly an answer, Greg, and I think that's I think from that perspective, I mean, politely, with this whole debate about hybrid work, and it's still a bit of an unknown in terms of actually the legacy and what's the longevity of this. So I think a lot of organisations and boards and our corporate members we speak to are still grappling with this about this, and we went on to plug our own conference. For some of you were there and some of you didn't make it, encouraging people to come back into that office. How do you get creativity? Again, we are human to human, we do need that. So without going into a hybrid working webinar, that is a challenge. Sophie, I did note you were going to come in. Was there something you wanted to add on that?
Yes, I'm like the dog trying to catch a fly. No, I was actually going to build on something that Greg said, because that collaboration piece has been really, really strong, obviously, over the last 18 months, we keep on quoting. And hybrid is really an opportunity, I think, for our profession to demonstrate how innovative they can be in empowering people to work wherever they want to be working from. And as our own research has shown over the course of that last 18 months, we did several repeat polls with people. As you know, the sentiment about returning to the office is really going up and down, and I don't think we're quite there yet with where are we going to settle on this. But then the hybrid model is not necessarily one solution for all anyway, and it really is about putting workplace theory in practice, where you need to listen to the needs of your employees to make sure they can do their best possible work wherever they're working for. Why this is an opportunity in relation to sustainability is because the FM has traditionally had control over the space, and that space now is changing. But it really is an opportunity to also demonstrate where they excel in other areas, where they have to deal with people and the management of people, the impact of things like the living wage, and how are you going to support people in having a fair pay for a fair job when you are struggling with kind of your space allocation, or you're trying to figure out how much space you need. But FMs are resourceful in this way, and they always say, they are about people. So I think they will come up with the solutions, provided we give them the tools.
No, thank you, Sophie. Right, audience, you're sending your questions in. I'm going to get to them. They're coming in thick and fast. So we've got 15 minutes to go, folks. So please bring them in. Now, I think this, I don't know if this is a cry for help or not, but I'd be intrigued from the panel's perspective. We've had a question in and it's been anonymous, so they've not given their name, around how can FM drive forward sustainability in an organisation that does not intend to make sustainability a primary goal? So this does tie in with the, I guess to a degree, the intent and action, but possibly that individual might be second guessing. Might be working in that organisation. What's your views on that? So anyone that got any support for that individual?
Yeah, maybe just a quick view of that is this environmental and sustainability issues have been peripheral to mainstream business for the past 35, 40 years. But one thing that we have seen in the last 18 months is that change happens fast. And when it happens, it's irreversible. So for anybody who's probably facing that Eiger phase of an organization which isn't fully committed, I'd suggest perhaps having a look at Rethink X, who really take apart the view of how society can change. And once it is embedded, it goes quick. So today in San Francisco, 80% of journeys are actually by hailing vehicles, by taxis and Ubers and etc. And that just 4 years ago was completely the other way around. So when a new technology arrives, whether it's PV, energy efficiency, circular economy, it lands and it changes fast. So keep the enthusiasm up.
Yeah, and thank you for being on this webinar, which is a start, and maybe get some of your colleagues to come on this to support you. But yeah, from that point of view, hopefully that helps in some way. Obviously, I'm sure that person isn't alone. So Duncan, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. I think as well, I think at some stage the realization the penny has to drop that it's going to be forced upon them, that they're going to be penalized for inaction. And then, you know, their staff, their clients, their investors, their suppliers will start with their feet and walking away. And again, going back to the previous point, it's one of the big things I think people are having to look at is what is going to happen to your people. It was mentioned at the IWFM conference on Monday that, you know, people living in certain areas or people living, you know, outside certain are going to be enticed to maybe move house, to move to a different location to work, or a different organization will offer them different benefits in terms of what the current organizations are offering them. So if any organization is not keeping up with the Joneses, they're going to get left behind, and that's only going to mean one thing.
Yeah, and keeping up with the Joneses, I'm going to keep this debate going in terms of next question, which ties in with elements of what you said there, respectively, Duncan and Paul, about don't be left behind on this, because some of this is going to be legally binding. The UK has made ambitious net zero commitments as part of its recently announced 6 carbon budget, which some of you on this webinar might be aware of or not, respectively. 78% reduction of emissions by 2035, which includes, if you're not aware, a drastic reduction of energy consumption and retrofitting of buildings of all types and sizes. Could you please comment on how these legally binding carbon reduction targets are driving policy, regulation and practices across the sector? So Sophie, I want to weave another question additionally into that, obviously from an IWFM point of view, how policy and that naturally legislation has always shaped sustainability, but such targets as recently announced as that, is that going to help the individual to just ask the previous question? Because a lot of this is now legally binding, so you have to do it.
Yes, well, the targets are legally binding, and that will be an imperative or an incentive to comply with, because if you are not seen to do that, then you are going to be left behind, as colleagues already said. And why would people want to do business with an organization that's not contributing to a sustainable future? And that is an increasing peer pressure that I think is becoming much more accepted, including from employees and clients and the supply chain. But I would say while the targets are there, I think some of the implementation, there's still quite a few questions about how to get there. And as long as there's room for maneuverability about the presentation of some of these things, there is an opportunity for not all organizations to play to the same field or the same game even. So especially, we've already heard it, how important Scope 3 is, especially for FM organizations. I'd like to see greater consistency in some of the frameworks, much like we've seen with the social value framework, because having kind of uniformity in the methodologies makes it not as easy for organizations to misrepresent how well they are doing in those areas. And again, it's been mentioned before, this is where science-based targets and verifiable data and verifiable and validated reporting is so important. And that's just, we've got the targets there, but we haven't got the entire roadmap. And of course, I'm not advocating that everything needs to be done according to one precise way, because we need to leave scope for innovation, and people need to have the flexibility to approach problems from a variety of different ways. But there needs to be much greater clarity across the field that you can compare that organizations are doing worse or not as good well across the board, really.
No, that's it. Did anyone have anything to add? Because I'm going to move into a couple of theme questions that are coming through, and the word hope has been mentioned numerous times. So I think this particular question is quite important. We're aware of COP26 in Glasgow that kicks off at the end of October across mainly November. But could you please share your 2030 vision and all your 2050 net zero targets and your hopes, expectations for what will be achieved at COP26 in Glasgow? So very broad question, but from your respective individuals, what's your hopes on that? What would you like to see? As I say, the UK has been a leading light on sustainability, and sometimes that shouldn't be forgotten. We were one of the first countries to push around the agenda. Yes, there's work to be done, but what would you like to see? So who wants to kick off on that, answering that question?
I'm happy to, and I won't kind of touch too much on, we've made a clear commitment to achieve net zero well in advance of 2050, and I won't go into what we're doing there. But as for COP26, and again, it's got raised in the conference on Mondays, I think the focus will definitely be on funding to support decarbonisation in developing countries. And it came up in Leo Johnson's kind of piece where we had a bit of debate about it. And I just think, and I'm quite passionate about this, I think there really is little point in Europe, North America, China, etc., making big strides if we're not helping developing companies to achieve change. And what I said previously is clear up, what damage we've done already with polluted rivers, oil slicks, boat graveyards, etc. So, that's what I hope would be achieved, and that's what I'd like to see at COP26.
Anyone else, Paul?
From a practical viewpoint, I think the timing for the current administration is to get the final version of the Environment Bill through Queen's Assent at the same time. So that's going to really bring in some significant rubber stamping of these efforts around the climate change, circular economy and net biodiversity gains. So there'll be real flesh onto some of these targets. So for me, there's a lot at the high international relations level, which relates to the International Climate Fund, as Duncan's just mentioned. But in terms of pragmatic aspects, I'd advise everyone to keep their eyes on what's coming out of Parliament in the next 8 weeks. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and I think there'd be a big media shift on that, particularly as COP26 is in the UK, to state the obvious. So there will be a lot of noise across the media around that. So I'm sure people will keep abreast of that, and as well as some of those legislations that are that are being tabled and possibly going through. Greg, we've had a couple of questions about the SIG and how they could get involved in that, and how the SIG are helping support this challenge. So just want to make a point here. It doesn't stop here with the survey. It's an evidence base. It helps us support our work within insights and policy, which Sophie obviously heads up. So hopefully Tom's social value is one aspect where intent and action happen, because social value was an area we explored in 2016-17, and we supported that with the social value. So hopefully this demonstrates the survey does lead us to action. But Greg, to allow you to answer the question, sorry, what's the SIG's involvement and some of its plans going forward? Because I sense from some of the attendees are interested to know more and get involved.
Oh, that's fantastic. If that's one of the outcomes, it would be brilliant. Yeah, as I think I alluded to earlier, one of the main pieces of work we're undertaking currently is actually a review of sustainability and workplace and facilities management, of which we're trying to categorize it on a topic basis. We already have some excellent people in the special interest group on areas such as natural resource management, net zero carbon. Health and well-being is an area that we could do with a little bit more support on, particularly with equality and inclusivity as well. So if there's anybody out there that has specialisms in those and they'd be interested in joining us and trying to pay something back, you will see from the Sustainability Hub what we're looking to do, which is actually create that knowledge to provide information on what the areas could be, or how they interact with FM, and therefore some more usable information, or which direction do they need us to help invest in. Again, identifying the wellbeing agenda, and in particular the work that Sophie and Anne and others have done on social value does show that if we are able to identify what the issues are, we can actually put solutions in place.
Thank you, Greg. Now, this is my final question. So apologies to the audience. We will be sending the questions on. We have had a lot. Did make it clear it was an hour episode, and some of these challenges that we mentioned, we will be continuing in terms of moving it from intent to action, and certainly we'll follow up with such outputs as guidance, webinars, surveys, and collaboration with bodies around events and conferences to support FMs and workplace professionals to overcome these challenges. But a question for you all, really, as a wrap up. So I want this from each panelist, if possible. From the survey's findings, as we finish how we started, there's a gap between intent and action. What would be your final messages to the audience around how the sector can overcome these challenges? Possibly not all. I appreciate there's a lot there to cover, but just a final message to the audience to echo some of the questions that focused on around hope and how we move this forward. So, Greg, if we kick off with you and then go next to Sophie. I'm
going to be brief. Take the lead. Grasp the opportunity. Take the lead.
All right, I thought that was just answering that question, but that's your answer to that question. All right, sorry. Thank you, Greg. Sophie?
I'm going to go in threes: collaborate, upskill, and report. Collaborate because the task is just too big for one single person or area in the business to really deliver on it. Upskilling because the survey clearly demonstrates that holistic delivery of strategies is not happening across the board, and therefore we'd welcome that. And reporting, so you can effectively demonstrate the progress you're making.
No, thank you, Sophie. And Paul?
Set the targets, monitor, measure, and head for continual improvement.
Thank you. And last but not least, Duncan?
Just to echo what everybody's already said, know where you're starting from, clear understanding of what your footprint is, develop a clear metric to measure the performance. I think make sure there's board accountability at the very, very top that will monitor and support your progress, and make sure you have the resources in place and budget, because it's going to cost you to run it, and there should be a good ROI on it, but to enable the delivery.
No, thank you. And thank you all. At this stage, I just want to say a massive thank you to the panel today. That's Greg Davis, Sophie Hooper, Paul Owen and Duncan Edwards. I appreciate we had only an hour to tackle this intent to action and the challenges that the profession faces. The report gives us a good backdrop to highlight. As an institute, we're going to continue sustainability with our SIG work, for our policy and insight work, to support our members and non-members around that, and you see all that information on our Insight Hub, including our Sustainability Hub that's got a dedicated hub to sustainability, where you will find the report, and there's the image of the front cover there for you just to delve a bit deeper on the back of Greg's great presentation today, to read that at your leisure and cascade to colleagues where you wish. So you'll find dedicated content hubs, which we have a sustainability one I've mentioned, research reports and good practice guides, and a lots more. Now, this is a plug where we've got our IWFM awards. Wow, time comes around quick. 2020 only seems like a year ago. Yeah, it was only a year ago, but time flies. The IWFM Impact Awards 2021. This is a plug to say book now. Tickets are available. It's at the Grosvenor House in London. So you can find further information on our website. So please go there. Thankfully, this is the last slide. I mean that in a way that we could have gone on for another hour. I appreciate these are only an hour webinars, but joking aside, I want to say a massive thank you to the audience for joining us today. Once again, the panelists, encourage you to look back at this webinar, look at the report, forward on to your colleagues. This recording will be shortly on our website, so you can cascade to colleagues that can make today's webinar. Also, we do have a very, I said very 4 or 5 times there, short survey for you to complete. This isn't just to judge today's episode, bearing in mind the challenges we were facing in terms of trying to tackle such a strong debate in an hour. We will continue this as promised as part of our series, but really for you to give us ideas around areas that you would want to address on our webinar series, areas you want to see in guidance, areas you want to see in research. And we've acted on that in the 56 episodes that we've created to date. So we have listened and acted on that feedback. So please appreciate you to fill in that short survey, because it does give us great feedback and insight for us to act upon. So next week, we've got another episode as part of our NTT webinar series. It does continue. That will be announced on Friday, so I'm sure it'll be another stellar webinar. So once again, thank you to the panel. Last but not least, thank you to the audience for joining us for this hour. Hopefully you got some feedback from the panel around the challenges, as well as the reports now available for you to read at your leisure. So thank you again.